Welcome back to Drive Your Thoughts podcast. I'm your host, Master Coach Carrie Marshall, and it's time to go after those goals.
Yeah, whether ready or not, life's coming hard, no breaks, no stop. And if you put me on the spot, don't get it twisted. I never drop. If you feel a bit out of control and out the box, here's a way that you could drive your thoughts. Turn this podcast on, it's a lock. Carrie Marshall on the clock.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm so excited to be here today. We are going to talk about the difference between a wish and a dream. So a lot of times we hear about wishing, and a lot of people put wishing and dreaming together. But as a goal coach who helps people go after their dreams, I want to stake my claim right here that wishing and dreaming are completely different. They are not the same thing. And so we want to get away from wishing and toward dreaming, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the difference between a wish and a dream. A wish is something that we hope will happen to us. It's the time that we're like, I wish. There's a reason that the genie in the bottle has 3 wishes and not 3 dreams in there, okay? Wishing is, I wish it would happen to me. Dreams are, I'm going to make this happen for me. Watch the difference there. When I'm dreaming, I'm in charge of it. I'm in charge of making it happen. I'm taking ownership and accountability that I'm in charge of taking the action toward that. Versus a wish where I'm saying, I'm here. I hope it can happen to me. Now, I'll tell you, I love books. I love reading. So within that, I listen to a lot of like how people speak. This also comes from coaching, my training as a master certified coach. When you listen to how people speak, it tells you a lot about where they're at mentally. And so, for instance, I hear a lot of people say, I wish I had that. So they could be, car drives down the road and they're like, oh, I wish I could have that car. What they're saying is, I wish that somebody would figure that out for me and let it come to me. That's when you hear a lot of people say like, that must be nice. I wish I had that. What they're saying is they're judging another person. And then they're saying like, I wish I had that. Never do you ever hear people say, I dream of having that. Do you see even how we use our words and how it matters? Because there's such a difference when we're talking about dreaming versus wishing. Because when we get into wishing, it's, I wish it would happen to me. So I want you to think about your life and like, where are you wishing things would happen to you? Maybe you wish that you had the beach body. Okay, notice the difference between wishing it would happen and then if you said like, I dream of having this beach body. Dreaming, you're taking ownership that you're you are the one that has to be the one to make that happen. So then when we talk about dreams, we go, okay, well, if you want that, then what are you willing to do to get it? Same thing with business. Right now, I'm helping somebody start from very, very scratch of a business. And it's been interesting to watch as we've kind of discussed, like, they'll say something like, I wish I already knew how to do Facebook ads. I'm like, I'm kind of sometimes a hard coach. I'm like, no. I'm like, we don't use those type of words here. Wishing might have to be something that is like a swear word at our house. We have one thing, this is like a total side note, but it's hilarious. Like, I don't know is like one of the worst things that you can say in my home. And it doesn't matter. We have a lot of like kids that'll come over and they'll say like, what do you want for dinner? I don't know, or I don't care. And all of the kids that have been around me and in our home, they'll like look over to the person that said like, I don't know. Don't say that. Like they're like nodding, like, don't say that. Don't say that in front of Carrie. Cause I'm like soapbox in place. Let's talk about why that is like the worst thing that you can say. And really, it all comes back to wishing or saying, I don't know. It's very passive. Because honestly, I'm totally fine. If there was a kid that came over and I said, what do you want for dinner? And he was like, I would love this homemade noodles that my mom makes, and then this homemade pesto and this and this and this. I'd be like, that sounds amazing. And I have bought noodles and some Alfredo sauce. Like, does that work? Just because you put it out into the world doesn't mean that you're going to get it. And that's kind of what I've told these kids is like, it doesn't matter if I don't have it available or I'm not willing to do it, but never be passive with your life. Never be passive with what you want and what you desire. Like that should never be a thing. You can also say, pizza sounds good and I'm fine with anything else. That's okay. And it's the same thing with our wishing. Like, that's why I'm like thinking this through. I'm like, yeah, wishing might have to be a swear word in our house because wishing goes back to passivity. Like, I'm just being passive about what I want. Oh, I wish this would happen. I wish I could have that. I wish I could have this. You're being really, really passive in your life if you're wishing for something instead of dreaming and doing something. Since I'm on the topic of teenagers, I was talking to a teenager the other day and we were talking about a dream. It's a car that he wants. And so we were talking about how to make that happen. And so, we were talking about how much does a car cost? How much do you have now? What would insurance be? So logistically, we kind of started to talk about this dream. And then he got really sad and he's like, I can't make that happen. And I'm like, hold on there. Don't say that. Like, let's think about how it's just an obstacle that needs to happen, right? We need to just learn how to overcome the obstacle. And so then we kind of talked about, which is what we do on the podcast. How do I overcome this obstacle? And so I want you to just kind of think about if you're in the wishing stage, just realize that you're not going to get a lot done from there. Wishing might, if I'm giving wishing any credit at all, it might help you to see what you desire, but most of the time wishing doesn't even come from that. Most of the time wishing comes from that passive place where we see something, it hasn't been on our radar. It's not like we desire it. It's not been a dream of something. And then we're like, oh my gosh, I need that. And I want to figure out how to make that happen. It's like oh, I wish I had that. And it's very like, meh. It's kind of lazy. A wish is a lazy dream. I'm going to put that on Instagram. The best example that I could give you, honestly, is the difference between when I got my Hummer versus sometimes, like, I love cars. You all know that about me. But I see a lot of cars that are amazing and fast and interesting and sexy and cool. And a lot of times I'll be like, oh, I wish I had that. Like, I'll see something drive down the road. I saw a Maserati the other day. I hadn't seen this body style before. And I saw it drive down. It didn't have plates on it. So obviously it's a new one. And I was like, oh, I wish I had that. Like, that's pretty cool. Never have I looked up the Maserati's new cars. I haven't done any research on Maseratis. And I was like, oh, that was a very passive wish, right? I'm like, do I desire to have that? I'm like, not really. It was so different than when we went and got our Hummer, where I was like, I have pictures of it. I've researched it. I actually knew so much about this 93 Hummer that we got. Because I've been researching it for decades. Like, I'm obsessed with this Hummer. So can you see the difference there? There's a lot of difference between seeing something go by and being like, oh, I wish I had that. It's pretty lazy versus then actually going out and doing something about it. Now, to kind of like segue into this, if I would have seen that and been like, no, I actually really want it. Now watch as I start to do thinking about it a lot, planning, looking, researching, talking to other people about it. That's when it becomes then from that wish to the dream, which is why I said maybe wishing might be helpful a little bit. If I was to give it any type of leeway there, I think that would be it. But I want you to just understand that there's just, when we are just in the wishing phase, it's very passive. It's very lazy. And what we're doing is we're saying that other people outside of us and our circumstances are in charge of our life and making things happen instead of actively dreaming and then going out and doing from that space. So just remember that if you're in the space of always wishing, I'm just going to call you out on it. And I just want to kind of mention that it's time to stop wishing and it's time to start actively dreaming, actively doing, actively taking accountability that you are in charge of your life. If you decide you want a Maserati and that's a dream of yours, like, amazing. Like, let's figure out how to make that happen for you. If you have this dream of writing a book, owning a business, whatever it is, going to Disneyland, maybe you've never been. Maybe that's a dream of yours. Well, let's create something to make it happen now. One of the best things that I can tell you to do is I'm such a huge fan of vision boards. I use vision boards a lot with my clients. I'm actually getting ready. One of the things that I do with my year clients is we do an all-day intensive, meaning that we actually meet in person. And we do an all-day intensive. It's me and them, and we are coaching. It's like 7-8 hours, sometimes 10 hours that day. But I'm just getting ready to go and do an all-day intensive. The fun thing is with my clients, you can either come to me, I can come to you, or we can meet somewhere in the middle. And it's been fun. I've done all three of them. All three of them are delightful. But I'm just getting ready. I'm prepping for one that's coming up. And one of the things that we're doing is we're going to do vision boards while we're there. And so the reason that I like vision boards so much is that it helps us to visualize what our dreams are. And when we can have it somewhere that we look at a lot, like a daily reminder, it can be really powerful for us. And so if you're in that phase of going from a wish to maybe a dream to maybe like, well, what's next for me? Like, what do I do here? A really good step to just kind of show yourself that you're invested in this and you're willing to take the time and energy to make this happen, but kind of not know what's next, is to make a vision board. And so a vision board is essentially just visual reminders of what your dreams are. And so just remember that you can really take anything. You can print it off of a computer. You can go and grab magazines. Magazines are my favorite. Maybe just a generational thing. I don't know, but I love doing vision boards with magazines. So just kind of remember that it doesn't mean that you have to get into massive action today towards your dreams, but what it does mean is that you need to start taking ownership that you're in charge of your life. Remember, wishing is lazy and it's a bad word. Dreaming is where we want to land. Okay. Now, some of you might not agree with me. That's totally fine. But I want to kind of continue the conversation over at Instagram. This is actually one of my favorite things about the podcast is how many of you actually come over to Instagram and interact with me. Today is a drop day for my podcast, and it delights me to no end that like you'll jump on and be like, hey, just listen to the podcast. Like you said, let's talk about it. So let's talk about it. So let's continue the conversation over at Drive Your Thoughts Coaching on Instagram. Tell me, where have you seen that you've been lazy wishing, and how are you going to get into active dreaming? I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to this podcast episode. If you're ready to get in the driver's seat of your own life, you can come and follow me at Drive Your Thoughts Coaching on Instagram, or come and see more ways to work with me at driveyourthoughts.com.
Yeah, whether ready or not, life's coming hard, no breaks, no stop. And if you put me on the spot, don't get it twisted, I never drop. If you feel a bit out of control and out the box, here's a way that you could drive your thoughts. Turn this podcast on, it's a lock. Carrie Marshall on the clock.